What's up, everyone? This is Ryan from Corners Unknown. I'm here with Connor and Graham Williams. We are here to talk about a couple films, and the hope of this new little series or podcast is to essentially talk about these obscure films at length and try to touch more specifically or focus more specifically on the soundtracks that are paired with these films. For this episode, we're going to be speaking or talking about Eyes Without a Face. This film was directed by
Georges Franju.
So this film is an adaptation of Jean Redon's novel, and it came out around 1959-1960, and it was scored by Maurice Jarre, or I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce that in French, the Jarre.
Jarre, I think.
Jarre, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that was scored, it was scored by him. And I didn't realize this, but apparently Mr. Jarre, he's done a ton of movies, like a ton. And I never realized this until I looked him up on IMDb. Like, he has well over 100 or a couple hundred films that he's done scores for. It's crazy. And he passed away somewhat recently, within like the last decade. He passed away in 2009. This wasn't his first film, Eyes Without a Face, but this was relatively early on in his career. It seemed, based on his filmography, one of his first films he did a score for was back in 1952. And then Eyes Without a Face was one of the first full-length features he seems to have done music for, and this came out in 1959, 1960. So just a little bit of context. But from a story perspective, do either of you guys have a way of describing just kind of like the general film for folks?
Well, it's a doctor who's a surgeon who somehow disfigures his daughter's face.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's experimenting to get a face transfer of girls he's abducting.
Right.
To fix his daughter's face.
Yes.
Pretty much the overall story.
And it's just kind of, trying to find ladies that kind of resemble a similar facial structure, kind of a similar, like kind of like a beautiful face, that kind of to graft their skin onto his daughter's skin. Mm-hmm. And it's effective. I mean, that's essentially it. It's a pretty, like, the story is quite simple, but I think it's a very effective movie, and just the lack of so much music makes it so. I don't know how it made when I watched it. It made me feel a lot more. There's like a weird feeling, like there's just kind of like this weird cold indifference to it, like the way it's shot. Like, even when some of like the more horrific scenes are going on, there's like no tension building music at all. It's just kind of like, here it is, and it's just like showing.
He was predominantly a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah,
preceding his career, and
right.
His best documentary was called Blood of the Beasts, and was a 1949 film that showed an animal going from start to finish through a Parisian slaughterhouse.
Oh shit!
Yeah, because he came from that more documentary filmmaking background that obviously creeps into his filmmaking when he's taking the jump into these fictional worlds. He's brought that documentary clinical eye with him, because even some of the surgeries is not even a hint of anything going on.
It's just kind of, it happens.
Score.
Yeah.
Performing the surgery.
Right. Yeah. No. It's kind of like the lack. It's almost like the silence is its own soundtrack, or kind of speaks to the mood of the film itself, which is, I found to be really interesting, and I think that it accents, or it kind of enhances the horror that's happening on screen in a lot of cases.
If they'd given it a more gothic treatment, a more hammer horror treatment with lots of organ, we'd probably not be sitting talking about it. It would have just been another mad scientist film. But the fact that for a lot of the film there is no music to detract.
Right.
You see the poor girl wandering the corridors endlessly.
Yes.
And a little bit of you just crying out for a bit of music to go with that to make it a more comfortable experience.
Right.
But the use of not having any music there sort of elongates those scenes and helps hem you into the whole sorry story of this poor girl. So I think for me that's the sad undercurrent, as Connor said. He's abducting a series of girls, and I think to start with he is trying to make amends for disfiguring his daughter. I think there comes that point in the film where he just becomes so obsessed.
Yes.
She becomes one of his test subjects, like the dogs in the cages, I think. And there's those poignant little scenes with her and the dogs in the cages, because she's as much in a cage as those poor dogs are. And the use of the mask as well.
Yeah,
obviously.
The mask is creepy as all fuck too. When I saw that mask in the film, I was just like, gee, like something so creepy about it. Just like the way it looks, so lifelike, but like the cheekbones and everything, it just like conforms perfectly to her face. Super unnerving to look at her move around.
And seems to put a real depth in the eyes as well, doesn't it? Like she's staring out from this prison, and
it's like a creepy porcelain doll.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And who likes those? And I know
terrifying.
John Carpenter cited it as the reason he put Michael Myers.
Oh, interesting.
Black and white mask for Halloween, which, again, reading about this, I found out it's actually a William Shatner mask, which has been sprayed white. So, there you go. That's how terrifying Shatner gets.
That's pretty funny.
And the fact that, because again, the actress has very few lines.
Yes.
Actually coming through the film, speaks so eloquently through her eyes.
Yeah.
And I think for me as well, like you say, the lack of the music, and when the music comes in, is incongruous. It's almost cheerful.
Yeah.
It's got this sort of like perverse delight in the situation it's scoring, which makes you feel a bit like you shouldn't be enjoying the film. Makes you feel a bit unclean,
right? Because
you're enjoying the film too much. And well, Connor will probably be able to cast some light on the lighting there, but it seems to the film gets a bit lighter and more defocused towards the end.
Interesting.
So I don't know if he's maybe rubbing the boundaries between what is real and what is becoming phantasmagorical for this poor girl.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's these emotive bits of the film, the emotional content, that do drag it out of it's another mad scientist,
right,
up to no good film. And even the androgynous nature of his assistant dehumanizes that character to become this sort of like robotic, almost concentration camp guard figure in the film, just emotionlessly blindly following.
Right. Well, let's get into that. So let's try and dig a bit into the film itself. The opening is a pretty I found the opening to be quite chilling, and kind of linking this back to what you were saying, Graham, with the lady. I don't know what her name in the film is, because I rewatched it without subtitles, but for some reason I thought of her. I just started calling her Helga, because she has kind of like weird eyebrows or whatever. I was like, I'm just gonna call her Helga. I don't know what my deal is there, but yeah, like it opens with her kind of driving along, long roadway, pockmarked with trees, and she's taking some sort of a corpse without a face to a ravine, essentially, to dispose of the body. And that's the body of somebody the doctor tried experimenting on for a skin graft for his daughter, correct?
Yes.
But that opening song, that's like where you kind of get hit with this weird, it's almost like this dizzying, spiraling, like almost circus-like music, I think.
Yeah, remind me of circus music.
Right, right. And it's kind of like this disorienting, weird, and it kind of that soundtrack kind of paralleling this with Tetsuo and some of the theme songs.
It's always with that girl.
Yes, every time she's by herself specifically, that song is kind of playing, kind of like that dizzying, kind of crazy, manic, circus-like song. And I thought that's kind of a running, or that's like a recurring bit throughout the film as you kind of march through all these scenes.
Kind of creates a sense that she's always up to no good.
Yeah.
Trying
Yeah.
to find a new girl to adopt or
Right.
Drop the corpse off of.
Right. Yeah. So basically, what happens is, and Graham, do you have anything? I'm sure you have a lot to add on that, like with respect to the circus, like song, like did that exude or like conjure up any interesting feelings for you, or did it like fire off any synapses as to what it represents?
Definitely. You said that sort of. You both said that sort of like kaleidoscopic circus, sort of like big top music.
Yeah.
It seems like everything's just right on the borders of getting out of control. And
Right.
It's incredibly well written piece of music, and he's used a couple of really clever tricks to add to that sort of discordancy, and a couple of the instruments are slightly off key, which and unless you listen for it really, really carefully, you're not necessarily going to pick up on. But as part of the whole, it still adds that sort of slightly jarred, sort of psychedelic aspect. So you don't know whether you're grounded or not. It disorientates you. And I mean, like you were saying again with Tetsuo, especially with Helga, going and very fetishistic in like both her dress and the like blind devotion to what she's doing for the doctrine. But
do you actually know the name of her? Because I just called her Helga just because I wanted to. I don't know what her name is.
The actress is Alida Valli.
Okay. Does she have a name in the film? I don't know if she's even called out by a name.
I don't recall her having any name other than just being this presence, but I'd have to watch it again with the subtitles to maybe pick up if she is ever named, but I think that she's a nameless character.
Right, and that kind of suits her aesthetic or her purpose in the film, right? Like kind of subservient, like not really, like she's kind of a drone of some sort, right? Or she's kind of just
dehumanized.
Right.
Yeah,
she's just like another tool
for the scientist.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Scalpel of her own.
Right. So basically what happens after that, the opening scene, the corpse is dumped, and then the corpse is subsequently found and taken to like a coroner's office, or kind of like a place where they identify a morgue, right? Taken to a place where they identify the body, and then I think I didn't watch it with subtitles, so this last time, so I'm a little fuzzy on these details, but I believe the doctor is called in because they basically play it off as if his daughter, who lost her face, who's kind of the center point of this film, the focus, the nucleus, they play it off as if she disappeared or died. And then he goes in to identify the corpse of this lady that they did the operation on, and then he basically says, "Oh, that's my daughter." So that's the way of them confirming. He kind of like abates any sort of scrutiny from, the police being like, "Oh, okay, that's her, she's dead." And then he kind of pretends to be, brokenhearted about it, just to kind of play it off that she passed away. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, please. But that's kind of the impression I get. They go to her funeral, and they kind of play along with this idea that she's dead, and they bury her. And then they kind of his assistant, the drone lady, she kind of goes out into the world again to go find another victim, essentially. And they try again to repeat this procedure under the guise that they think the daughter's dead and they can get away with abducting another girl, essentially, or another young woman.
Definitely, in that first opening few scenes, has already condemned the poor daughter to her ghost-like existence. Essentially, he's already killed his daughter off and forced her to become this physical manifestation of a ghost that can only haunt a very small area from the moment the film opens.
Yeah.
And you do get that little plaintive bit of music that comes in, which again repeats through the film with use of 2-3 instruments. Very simple leitmotif, but because it's so Spartan, the whole soundtrack, it adds power when you do hear the music.
Yes.
That become real events, whereas with the more conventional soundtrack, I don't think it would have helped or enabled the film to become the work of art that it has become.
Yes, definitely. How about you, Connor? I know that you haven't seen, just kind of to add more to this, like kind of, because I know you haven't, I don't think you saw this before Graham and I've seen it. Like, what did you, like your impressions of it, and also from like a lighting perspective, at least like in the opening bits?
The opening sequences are pretty cool. Well, especially the very beginning, the car driving through, it reminded me of a lot of Alfred Hitchcock's films, actually.
Okay.
It's the whole driving in a car and the lady's all paranoid and looking behind and making sure nobody's following her.
Right.
Very much like Vertigo. One scene that I was really stoked on while watching this was right before they get into the morgue. You see like the reflections in all the cars in the parking lot, and they lined this tree up with the car. Like, in the hood of the car had the tree going straight up it. A perfect vertical reflection of the tree.
Huh.
I just like that stylistic choice.
Interesting.
It might have been done on accident.
I didn't even pick up on that.
That's really cool. Let's keep that in there.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. So
lighting wise, I noticed there's a lot of kind of directional lights.
What are directional lights specifically?
Well, in this film, there's a lot of like the lights are set low and they're hitting, I don't know, either like a rail or I don't know, some object and casting a shadow on the wall behind.
Oh, okay. I
don't really know what they're trying to say with that, but I just like the shadows they were creating and all the different shapes and cuts of shadow.
Right. Did that like emanate a certain mood or feel when watching the film? Like, did it add anything to it, like in a horror sense for you, or was there like some artistic choice you noticed and you're like, oh, you can see how they're trying to like create a more of an atmosphere or something with the way they were doing the lighting? And like, that's something that I just can't really pick up on nearly as well.
Well, for that, I guess you could create kind of like mystery and I don't know, a sense of trying to figure out what's going on with these girls during the scenes where they're doing the whole surgeries and whatnot. It's super, I don't know, soft and picturesque.
Right, kind of like this horrific,
yeah, dreamlike.
Yeah, and so I guess to advance a bit more and just kind of walk through more of the story. So essentially, what happens is the post them kind of identifying the body falsely as his dead daughter. They go back to the house to talk to the girl, the daughter, who's kind of trapped up at the very top, or she kind of lives at the roost, like the tallest point of this 3-story kind of mansion. And she's depressed. Like they do a real nice job of like not showing her face. Like, she kind of has her face buried in the couch and she's kind of mumbling out. I'm under the impression that was kind of a moment where they were trying to console her a bit. It was being like, we're trying to figure stuff out, trying finding a replacement face for you, essentially. Yeah, and then that's like kind of the first scene where you see her put on the mask and you get that really beautiful, melancholic yet uplifting, sort of like, what do you call those, like the little trinket boxes that have like the ballerinas kind of swirling in it? What do you call those? Kind of give me that vibe.
The music boxes.
The music boxes, yeah. I don't know if there's a special name, but like I kind of got that vibe. Like she kind of puts on the mask, and she's a little more comfortable, it seems, like, or at least she's like willing to kind of walk out into the world, and the world that she knows is essentially the home she's confined in. You kind of get like that angelic, beautiful little harmony, but it kind of has this melancholic, depressing undertone to it, and I would say that's kind of like the circus-esque soundtrack is for the drone lady. Like kind of like that angelic piano melody, kind of like that beautiful orchestral bit. That's kind of the theme for The Girl Without a Face, because in many scenes that song kind of recurs and loops back to kind of give it some levity, or kind of like this I don't know, it kind of instills this sense of beauty among this dreary landscape or the dreary house you're stuck in with these few people.
And I think it harkens to the doll-like nature, like Connor said, of her appearance.
Yes. Yeah.
To tie her appearance with that, like you say, a piece of music that's very reminiscent of a little porcelain ballerina in a box.
Sure.
So there's a bit of a metaphor there, I think, between her being the ballerina and the box being, the house she's trapped in, and kind of dehumanises her a bit, whilst, like you say, empowering her to be able to move around. It's already making her less human.
Yes.
Because of the sheer blankness of the mask itself, and then to tie that with that delicate, dainty little bit of music again, it's such a good use of juxtapositioning of the imagery and the sound, which subconsciously makes you a little bit more uncomfortable.
Right. She wanders around. She kind of wanders downstairs to the second floor, and as the music's kind of going, it's interesting to kind of see how, when I was watching this on the second time, how the mask kind of gives her some confidence, but she seems like just such a curious individual. Like, she's usually confined to the upper bedroom that she was stowed away in, but she's not forced to stay there per se. But when she doesn't have her mask on, it looks like she's kind of depressingly like staying up there, trying to not show her face to the world. And then when she puts on the mask, she kind of flourishes a little bit more. She kind of seems to gain a little more confidence, and she kind of goes downstairs and she kind of like looks at everything a bit more curiously. And I'm failing to recall if that's around the same moment that they capture their first woman, because I know that they capture a lady soon after you see her with her mask. I think what happens is she goes to the second floor and makes a phone call to that other doctor, correct, down the street.
Yeah, her fiance or boyfriend.
But then she doesn't say anything, right? Like, she calls to say something, and then he just keeps on saying, hello, what the hell? And then he just hangs up the phone. He just kind of gets aggravated, and she is trying to speak to the outside world, and she gets frightful. And then you kind of get the first image that sets up the end of the film, at least for me, visually, when she kind of looks at the painting of kind of the beautiful woman who almost looks like a Snow White character, and she's kind of standing with like her dress kind of blowing in the wind. She has some doves swirling about her, and one of them is like landing on her hand, and she kind of like looks at it, and she kind of, I don't know, she like admires it, or she, and that kind of sets up, I don't know, I think that kind of, it sets up the ending, and it seems to be kind of the imagery that they want you to associate with her, kind of like this, I don't know, like there's something about it, but we can get to that a bit later. And then what happens after that? So we got I need to look at my notes real quick. And I think that's the moment where they go, it's kind of like they go forward a bit. I keep calling her Helga, I don't know why. The lady goes to basically go get a new victim. She meets a lady and kind of coaxes her to come with her to live out in this villa way out in the sticks, essentially. They live in the country, or they live very far off the beaten path from the metro area they find her in. And she kind of drags her out there, and they really don't waste a whole lot of time knocking her out. But yeah, so basically the lady coaxes the woman, and you can tell as they're driving along, the lady that's the victim, you can tell she's getting a little more uncertain as they're kind of driving out further and further into the country. Like, she seems a little on edge just because they're going so far away from the city. And you kind of get a couple creepy moments of, the drone lady kind of wryly looking at her when she's, when the victim is like looking out the window at the landscape, and you kind of get some unsettling moments as they're going out. And they get to the house, and they introduce the lady to the doctor, And then pretty soon thereafter, the lady she just gets knocked out within the first couple minutes. Like, they really don't drag it out. They really just kind of punch you with it, you know? It's a very quick abduction.
If you were wondering what was going to happen to this girl, your wonders are dispelled, like you say, more or less immediately, aren't they? There's only one reason that this woman has been taken to this house, and we're going to get to it straight away.
Yeah, they don't waste any time in this. And just as a general note too, this is a very taut film. It's like an hour and a half, and it's like very quick. Like it kind of goes pretty quick. They don't draw out scenes really. It's just kind of one thing after the next. And in that moment, they knock the girl out, and as they're kind of shipping her, dragging her to the secret back room where the doctor does his surgery, the main girl catches. I mean, she obviously hears what's going on because you hear the girl scream, and then she kind of goes downstairs and follows them and kind of hides out in the garage as they drag the victim into this back room. She hides behind the car, and then as the doctor and the drone lady come out, they go into the main house, and the lady with the mask, she kind of sneaks in and goes to kind of see the victim. And that's where you get I think it's a pretty infamous scene, you know, when she kind of takes off her mask or whatever. She's not wearing her mask as she kind of touches the lady without, you know, the lady with the mask. She kind of goes up to touch
victim.
Yeah, you see super out of focus for a moment. You kind of see like the scarred, scorched face with like her pinhole kind of glistening eyes sticking out from just like this masticated face, and it's like out of focus, and then it comes into focus for a moment, and you're like, holy shit, that's like the special effects or the makeup they did for that was amazing. And then the lady shrieks out in terror, and like and then, you know, she backs away, and it kind of goes out of focus again. So you only get like that moment where you only get one moment where you see what she looks like without her mask, and it's pretty horrendous. And that's one of the moments when they kind of use a more, I would say, traditional scurry of like strings, you know, to kind of make like a horror moment, you know, like where it's like kind of loud and abrasive, and you're like, oh god, like this is supposed to be really scary.
Especially for that time.
Yes. Yeah, like that was a more traditional moment. Like it didn't, like that, and that isn't, I don't think that fits in the original soundtrack, I could be wrong. But like that little scurry, like that is one of the few moments where they kind of break the themes for each character. Yeah, and they use a more traditional horror sound.
I think it's the most conventional aspect of the entire score, is that one little pretty standard horror film power chord, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you guys just
comes in?
Just like general opinion, do you guys think like? Do you think the scene would have been better without any music at all? Like without that? Or like do you think that it was effective in the way it was used?
I think the scene would have been just as effective without any music, and like you say, it's that one little bit of conventional scoring that sort of sticks out from the rest of the score.
Yeah, for me it was more of like, I guess the horror is from the perspective of the victim.
Yeah.
That's how she was feeling when she saw her face.
Right.
But like personally, you know, I just feel sorry for the girl without a face.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's what I liked about that. Yeah, and that's what I liked about that scene too, because at first I was kind of like, oh, when I first watched this movie, I'm like, oh, this girl without a face, she's like kind of like sizing up her like I thought she was kind of like, oh, I want to see what this is like. But yeah, like when I watch that scene, you kind of see a bit of terror in her eyes, or a little bit of like anxiousness behind her eyes. Like she seems like she's unnerved by what's about to happen as well.
Like, this is what my father is doing to people. Like,
yeah.
This is wrong.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's what I like about it though. It's like she doesn't really use her words. She doesn't use words at all. Like you just kind of see like the hurt behind her eyes in that moment.
Yeah,
she like
it's
looks
all in
terrified.
the eyes.
Yeah. And like she looks almost as terrified as the girl down on the surgery table in a way. Like she looks nervous as all hell. And like from my perspective, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's it. I think that they juxtapose the victims and the daughter very cleverly throughout the film, because there's essentially not any real difference between the two. She's just a a sort of like lab animal to her father, and these victims that are being abducted, they're the other side of the coin for his poor deformed daughter, aren't they? And
right.
Maybe I'm too hard-hearted, but I don't get much of the Doctor actually having remorse and trying to save his daughter once he starts down the path of the actual face transplants. I think he's more driven by wanting to get that correct than saving his daughter. And I think, like saying, like Connor says, it's so brilliant that Edith Scope does such a good job just with the use of her eyes. And I think there's that little bit where she realises what's going on as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think that maybe the score or the lack of score kind of underlines the feelings or kind of the sentiment of what the Doctor's trying to do. Because whenever you see the Doctor, he doesn't have a theme. From my watching, it's like everything is it's just silent. Like it's kind of like cold, calculated.
Clinical.
Yeah.
It's like sterile almost.
Right, and I think that kind of emanates the, like, kind of his presence. It's just kind of like, yeah, like there's no, you kind of got the drone lady who kind of has the crazy behind her eyes. She'll do whatever she's asked to do, and you got that crazy circus music going, and then you kind of got the angelic, uplifting but melancholic bit for the lady without a face, and then for the Doctor it's just like pure indifference, or it's just kind of like, I'm just trying to like find a way to be like the best Doctor possible, or he's just trying to like forge a path in like the world of medicine or the world of operation.
Like a perfect Arctic silence, a cold silence, like you say, is never a hint of any music giving him any sort of humanity or any human characteristics. It's just, as Connor said, that sterile, utterly devoid of any humanity.
Yeah, that's when we get to the scene, right? Like the infamous scene where soon thereafter, after you kind of see the horror of the face, it kind of fades out, and then it's kind of the surgery scene, right, where her face gets cut off. She goes to see the dogs first, and then when she comes out of the room, then she sees the lady on the clinical table, on the table. I believe that's what happens. And she kind of, caresses them, shows them love. And I'm not terribly, I can't recall exactly why the dogs are there. I think that there's some sort of skin graft going on there, or some sort of experimentation. Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, and then she goes and sees the lady, and I could be screwing my chronology here if somebody wants to correct me. I took a lot of notes, and I was kind of writing furiously. But then, yeah, they go to the infamous scene where they're, the Doctor is essentially cutting off the woman's face. And, it's really not that grisly of a scene, per se. Like, it's not bloody, really. I mean, it's just very
precise kind of cuts.
Yeah, it's a pretty gnarly, like, just the thought of it, too. Just, like, you're knocked out, and somebody's just taking a scalpel and just kind of, like, outlining your face with, like, a pencil. And then they're just, like, just cutting it off. And then when they get to the eye part, that's when I was like, oh, God, this is not, like, they didn't show that part, but when he started like drawing the pencil lines around her eye, I'm like, I can't even imagine, just like, oh God, yeah, just slicing into that. But what did you guys think of that scene, or especially Connor, because you haven't seen that, this is the first time you've seen it? What'd you think of that?
I mean, I saw it coming. I was just like, oh, this is interesting.
Right.
But yeah, I just like how the whole, like, the composition of the shot, everything just felt really, I don't know, almost like they made it personal in a way.
Could you call to mind anything about the composition? Because I'm so bad with technical terms when it comes to films, but when you say composition, is that just kind of how everything is congealing in the scene, or like the way the camera's angled? And, like,
yeah, it's just how they're framing the image in the camera.
Okay.
You can tell that the surgeon's really, passionate about what he's doing, and he's almost obsessed. And
right.
He's just slowly drawing the lines, and I really enjoyed just the way it was shown.
Yeah.
And then how the lighting was soft and.
And what about it? Could you just explain that for me a bit further? Because I'm obviously inept. When you say like soft, like what specifically does that mean?
there's not much like contrast, not many shadows being casted,
Okay.
It's just,
And does that drive a sort of personal feel in your opinion, or like what kind of emotion does that exude for you when watching the movie?
Kind of, I don't really know.
Like does it almost make it like visually not as intense to watch or something like that? Like, is it like an interesting contrast, like the way, the softness of it with the horror of what's actually happening to this lady, like her face getting sliced off? Like, I don't know.
It kind of like makes it like how the surgeon sees it. He's kind of desensitized to what he's doing. He's just doing it because he wants to
okay no that
achieve a face transplant.
Right. Okay, no, that,
for him, it's not this menacing, horrible thing he's doing.
It's not like he's doing it for torture's sake. He's doing it to try and make amends as a while back.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. It's just because I'm so aloof to all these technical terms, and just like I'm not very in tune with the lighting and all that. So I'm just trying to understand this, and hopefully people who listen will like learn some bits about that as well, because that's something that I'll be paying attention to going forward.
I need to write it out.
Yeah.
So I can make my memory more clear.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so then after the scene, after the horrific scene, they slice the lady's face off, and there may be a couple bits in between, but basically, I think they have like they go and have dinner in the house, right? And that's kind of the moment when they're checking in on the doctor's checking on his daughter's face to make sure the skin graft isn't rotting away. And then they go into the back room to where the lady is with the bandages on her face. Yeah, so that's the moment when the lady is laying on the bed. She pretends to be asleep or knocked out still, and then drone lady, i.e. my favorite word, Helga, her favorite pronoun, tries to go administer her some food and water, and the lady bandaged knocks her over the back of the head with some sort of bottle. And then she runs into the house, and I don't know how early of a trope this is, if this is pre-trope or pre-cliche. She just starts running up the stairs. I'm like, oh God, what are you doing? And she goes up as high as possible into the home, the lady with the bandages on her face, gets up to like the third floor, and the doctor's trying to find her. And that's an interesting scene too, now that I'm thinking about it. Like, the doctor didn't even really like chase her down. Like, he kind of had a more like, or what's the Halloween, like the Michael Myers, like he kind of like just like, he just kind of walks after her. The drone lady was like, hey, I need you. And he's like, oh, she got away. And he's just like, oh, okay. And he like just kind of slowly walks upstairs, and he's kind of like looking.
Not even a threat.
Yeah. And then you hear the blood curdling scream from the room, and the lady just jumps 3 stories to her death and smashes her head on the concrete below. And that's like the unfortunate demise of that lady. And then the doctor and the drone woman, they go take her corpse, I believe, to the same grave that they deposited the corpse of the other woman in at the beginning of the film. They go, break out the latch door in the ground. They break the concrete and throw the body in there, dispose of it. And then soon thereafter, that's when the doctor notices there's a little bit of some chafing or a little bit of necrosis going on her skin, and then you get the interesting. I like the way that they did that. It wasn't just like,
same.
Yeah, like it was just kind of stills, like granted, like a documentary style. It was just like 4 or 5 like snapshots of the skin just rotting, and it just got grosser and grosser.
That was actually one of my favorite parts of the whole entire film.
Right.
Just for a second, like you say, it just becomes purely documentary. Just that sharp little rush of photographs, perfect in their hideousness, but again, much more subtle and nuanced than the Hammer horror version of the scene, which would be a full-on gore fest. And
right. Yeah, and her screaming bloody murder or whatever. Yeah, it's kind of more, like you said, it's more kind of like the clinical aspect of it, just kind of looking at it as if you're reading like a medical report. Yeah.
She's just a test subject.
And then she's kind of, like laying on the floor, dismayed in the following scene. And then there's a little bit of some context given to what the doctor's doing with the dogs. Like he kind of has like a shaved patch of a German Shepherd laying on a table. And I didn't watch it again with subtitles the second time, so I can't recall the exact detail as to what he was doing there. Probably some sort of experiment to figure out some breakthrough. And then I think in that moment, that's when we see the daughter again. She's wearing her mask, and kind of poetically, or kind of synchronizing with the initial, the beginning of the film when we see her talking, she goes downstairs again and she calls the doctor, or whomever, Jacques. Is that, and you said that was her boyfriend, or that was her previous partner? Is that the case?
I think so.
Right, and then that's the moment when she goes downstairs, calls him again, and actually like says his name, I believe, and then she kind of has overwhelming moment of stress and passes out. That's when we start getting into the tail end of the film, when the drone lady is out on the hunt again for another woman to claim victim of. And I don't think that she's successful out in the city, in the metro area. She doesn't find anybody, but what happens is this is at the same time she's looking for victims, the detectives that have been kind of sprinkled throughout the film, who they have moments of dialogue, they start catching on to the disappearance of a couple ladies and noting their similarities, kind of blue eyes and their beauty, how they all kind of have a certain look to them and they're beautiful, etc. And they're like, oh, okay, like they're starting to piece something together. And then I believe I can't recall exactly how they seem to have a hunch that it's the doctor, or they seem to get some whiff of the doctor being the case, of being the one that's stealing these ladies. And then that's when we go back to the doctor's office, and we're not in the building of the main doctor, but the kind of the other building where they treat other patients, closer up the road, correct? Like you kind of drive through a gate, and then you have this building where people are taken care of, and then further down the road is the villa where the mad doctor lives. And in this smaller building, there's a beautiful lady who says she's having some sort of issue. And is it the case that that lady was she intentionally trying to set up the doctor, or is that not the case? I can't recall directly off the top of my head. Do you guys remember that? No?
I think the inference is it is a trap, isn't it?
I thought it was. I thought like I thought the detectives kind of sent her there with the intention of
luring him out.
Right. I thought that's what happens. Right? I wasn't watching it again, as I said, without subtitles, so I was kind of like, oh, I think that's what's happening, because it's the same lady who was in the detective room, and then she's at the doctor's office, and I think she was just making up some medical issue for being there. Like, she was like, oh, I feel crappy. Like, she was making up some excuse. Right. And then you kind of get she's in this hospital, this ward, and you can tell the doctor's creeping on her a little bit. He's kind of staring at her and like looking at her and kind of studying her, but you can tell, like, the way he has like this dead look in his eyes when he stares at her, like you can tell he's just kind of figuring out how to get her out of there so he can try and slice her face off. And then she gets out of the clinic, and she calls to home to get a taxi, I believe, or she calls someone to come have her pick her up, and she walks out to the front of the clinic, and please feel free to fill in the gaps. I may be kind of skipping a little quickly here. Goes out to the front, and then the drone lady who failed to pick up any beautiful women outside in the city, she picks up this lady along the way, says, oh, I'll drive you home, and then she takes her back to the house where the doctor is, and
again the waltz comes in.
Yes.
In the background.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Good old Helga.
Yep. And when they get the lady in the car, they don't really waste any time again. They kind of just go straight to the lady on the table. This time, like, they don't even show them knocking her out because they've already shown it once. So they just cut straight to putting the woman on the table. And she kind of already has the pencil mark, I believe, lined out on her face, like she's about ready to be cut. And then that is the moment when the doctor's about to perform the surgery. Then the drone lady comes up and says, oh, hey, you have a phone call from the detectives about this missing woman that you just abducted. And to abate their concerns, he halts on the procedure, right? Goes out of the house, walks down the street to where he picked up, or where the lady got picked up, and then he kind of gives a good excuse to get around the suspicious detectives.
Yeah, he bluffs his way through, doesn't he?
Yeah, he somehow gets through, and they're like, oh, we're sorry for being nosy or whatever, and they part ways. And then at that moment, that's when I think the lady who was abducted, she wakes up from her stupor a little bit, and she's tied down, and that's the moment when the daughter really kind of becomes her own person, or starts to blossom a bit more, kind of like, you know, she picks up a scalpel, and you think she's gonna...
Yeah, she wants to put it into it.
Yeah, you think she's gonna, like, stick it... I don't know. Like, you kind of know she's not gonna do anything bad, but at the same time, you're like, oh, I don't really know what's going on, but she takes the scalpel, and the lady thinks she's gonna slice her open, and she actually ends up cutting the stomach strap away so she can get away. And then, the drone lady comes in, and then the daughter takes the scalpel and just shoves it right in the side of her neck, which I thought was pretty brutal.
That was so casual. Too.
I know. Yeah,
it was just like, oh, in your neck.
On the second watching, I thought it was I don't want to say funny, because that makes it sound like it was like I was like laughing at it. I wasn't laughing at it, but I just thought it was kind of amusing how she stabs her in the neck, and the lady just like stands there. Like, the drone lady just stands there for, like, a solid, like, 20 seconds and, like, gives a small monologue. And, like, there's, like, no blood spurting out or anything. It's just, like, in her neck. And then she, like, slowly backs away to the wall. And then she just, like, slumps down. I never felt like in that whole movie, I know that the drone lady was kind of consoling the daughter throughout. But I never really got much of a deep relationship between the two. So when the lady was stabbed, I'm surprised she was that... Maybe that was the intent, though. Maybe what's going on is the drone lady thought she was so invested in helping her get a new face, like she thought she was personally connected to the daughter, but the daughter thought nothing of her. Maybe that's the whole vibe that they were going for, the emotion, right? Like, the daughter's like, I don't give a shit about you.
Yeah.
Like, you're just hamming it up, and you're just, like, in it for this superficial reason. It's just like, okay, fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. And she just kills her, like just clinically. Like, she doesn't even care. She's just like, boom, done. Like, she doesn't even...
Yeah.
Kind of like her father in a weird way.
Yeah,
good point. Yes, because there's no emotive content there at all, is it? Doesn't even look like there's any anger or anything, and it, as Connor says, it's just utterly clinical.
Yep. Just like, just 90-degree angle, elbow back, and then just boom, right into her throat, like right between the pearls that she's wearing around her neck. I was like, man, nice shot, good hit. Yep. And then we're pretty much right at the end of the film at this point. Right after that, the lady, after she gets stabbed, the lady that was strapped onto the bed, she gets away, she runs away, and then immediately after the drone lady is stabbed in the throat, the daughter just turns around, goes to the dog cages, and just starts letting all of them free.
I love that scene.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and like the dogs don't attack or anything because she's been like showing them a lot of like love and caressing them and giving them attention and petting them, and
it's that scene there, I think, where you actually realise she's the least deformed of all of them, isn't she? She's got that heart and that warmth for the animals, and the others have become utter monsters, maybe not physically but emotionally.
Right.
And whereas she's the other way, she may have been physically deformed, but emotionally she's the only human left.
Right. That's a really interesting point. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's like bringing the film full circle for me right now, thinking about it that way.
Yeah, and then I love how the dogs escape out the front door, and the doctor's walking back over.
Yes.
They just maul his face off, and
Yep.
he becomes the faceless
Yep.
Monster,
as he dies.
Yeah, he dies by the hand. He kind of dies exactly. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I guess I was when I watched that. I know German Shepherds can be pretty harsh dogs, but some of the other dogs that attacked them, I was like, man, would dogs like that really maul somebody? I was like, I don't know. Some of those dogs look way too cute to do.
Maybe
like that.
he just tortured so many of them that they just hated the guy.
Yeah. Yep. And then you get that beautiful moment when, like, my favorite. It's probably it's a real great moment when the lady the daughter walks out, and the dogs are kind of they've done their deed and they've run away into the wild, or they've vacated the area. And she's kind of walking out very ghost-like and just kind of into the world for the first time, it seems, or kind of like as her new self. And then you have those birds, the doves, and it kind of calls back to the first moment I mentioned. Yeah, the painting. And like one of them lands on her arm or on her wrist hand area, and she's kind of just like slowly walking out into the woods at night, just kind of like not sure, like she's just kind of drifting off. And her nice theme kind of comes back and ties it off nicely. But yeah, I really love this movie. I just know that it's very controversial when it came out, and there are a couple moments, but on the whole, I mean, it's a very well-made movie, and it's very succinct and impactful.
Not one scene is wasted or a moment longer than it has to be, and I'm utterly biased, but it's hard to find a more perfect example of that simple trope of the mad scientist, that tired cliche turned into something that's so exquisitely beautiful. Right. And I don't think it's been done since, which I think is why it still stands out.
Yeah, definitely.
For films of that nature,
yeah,
where are you going to find a better one?
Right. How about you, Connor? Are there other bits you want to add to this? There's got to be.
No. I mean, we covered most of it. I really wish I watched it a second time so I would have more detail-oriented notes to talk about. But...
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was a great film. I liked it.
Yeah, no, it's some good stuff.
It's definitely kind of dreamy and just beautiful, and I liked it.
Well, that's the end of this episode. From Ryan, Connor, and myself, thanks a lot for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any thoughts or any queries, please get in contact, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Take care.